So Shavua Tov, Mivorach. I hope you guys are all well. We're going to continue from where we left off last week. We finished Perek Gimel, the third chapter of Sefer Nechemia. I'll go back just a little bit and summarize what we learned last week. We learned last week that when Sanballat is one of the governors around, he's the governor of the Shomron. When he and his friends heard that we, meaning Yehuda, Nechemia, started to rebuild the wall, obviously he was very furious. And then we saw that Sanballat and Tuvia were troubled when they heard that Nechemia wanted to help the people of Judea, of Israel. And they tried to basically intimidate the Jewish workers so they wouldn't be able to succeed in building the wall. And I mentioned that, ever since then, it never stopped, right? Even today, if you want to go into Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, you want to go into the Ir HaAtikah, and you want to go through, let's say, Sha'ar Shechem, you can get stoned, possibly stabbed to death. So it's very, very difficult. And that's basically what Sanballat, Tuvia, and Geshem HaRavi wanted to do. The nature of their discouraging attack is evidence, right? They basically mocked all of the workers. They used sarcastic tones. For example, they called the Jewish workers weak and pathetic. And they even said that the walls would break down very easily. If you remember, we mentioned in Perek Gimel, Pasuk Lamed Hey, that they said that even foxes wouldn't be, foxes, by just trying to pass through the walls, it would crumble because they're not real professional workers. And so much so that while mocking the Jewish workers, they said, what, do you expect that your God will miraculously help you build the walls? It's ridiculous. It's a waste of your time. Why have you been trying to build the walls? They can't possibly think that they complete the complete building the walls, not as amateurs and as fools. So they were basically just surrounding the workers while they are trying to build the walls and mocking them, possibly throwing stones at them, but not really putting their life in danger yet. Now, the thing is that there's always some truth. When people mock other people, there is always some truth. For instance, when a bully comes and makes fun of someone's dress, right? You're full of colors, you're pink, you're blue, you're wearing a long dress, short dress, very wide trousers, whatever it is, right? There's always a little bit of truth in what they're trying to say. So, the Jewish workers, they did not have the best materials to work with. And it was very difficult, getting rid of all the rubbles and the rubbish. So if it wasn't for Nechemia's actions, Sanballat and his friends might have been successful. But Sanballat and Tuvia basically chose to discourage and to criticize the workers in the beginning. And we'll see how they progressed. And they probably organized riots, shouting at the workers. Again, very similar to, for instance, right before the in Yerushalayim, before the Masah Degalim, right? The parade, the flag parades. Just before that, there were riots. The Arabs went out next to the walls of Yerushalayim and they rioted. And they basically tried. I'm going back to Nechemia. The surrounding nations tried to attack the morale, and that's a very powerful weapon because there's a certain breaking point that we all have, and somewhat it's in a way the opposite of faith. Faith, emunah, means believing that everything will work out at the end for the best. Discouragement basically looks for and believes that the worst, and we tend to forget about God. It's called choser bitachon. And that's what they were trying to do, to crunch down and try to show the workers that it's futile. They're not going to succeed. And they almost succeeded if it wasn't for Nechemia. So because of Nechemia, the workers in fact, had legal protection from the king. We saw that from Perek Bet, when Nechemia was given the letter mentioning that he has all authority. And therefore, because of that, because of Nechemia's presence, Sanballat and Tobiah, they didn't have any authority to actually stop the work. All they could really do at this point was try to discourage the Jews and stop them from building the walls. And Nechemia, he didn't debate them. We don't see anywhere where he's debating them. He's not standing opposite them and debating. He doesn't form a committee to try to deal with what was going on. He didn't even try to deflect and try to bring these 2-3 enemies, Sanballat and others, to court. He didn't try to directly face them. Instead, what he did, and where we ended last week's Perek, he decided to pray and daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the message is clear, that davening prayers basically is the first resource, not the last resort. In times, of opposition, we first turn to God. But after that happens, we'll see now in the beginning of Perek Daled, right now, immediately, what he does to actually go into action. We saw that Nechemia is a man of action. Unlike Ezra at the time where he was very into spirituality, here he's a man of action. So let's jump right in to Psukim Aleph and Bet from Perek Daled. Just enter some more people. Okay. Tov. So Perek Daled, Pasuk Aleph. Vayehi kaasher shama Sanballat v'Tobiah v'ha'aravim v'ha'amonim v'ha'ashdodim ki alta arucha לחומות ירושלים, כי החלו הפרוצים להיסתם, וייחר להם מאוד. So Sanballat, Tobiah, and the people of Arabia, Ammon, the Ashdodim, they heard that we were making progress, rebuilding the wall of Yerushalayim, and that the gaps between the walls that were ruined, in the last 100 years, were slowly being closed. So they all became very, very angry. Pasuk Bet. ויקשרו כולם יחדיו לבוא להילחם בירושלים ולעשות לו תועה. So they all plotted together to come and attack Yerushalayim and create confusion. So from talking the talk, from the idea of criticizing and mocking, now they are switching gears and now turning towards actual physical attacks. So when we talk about the gaps that were being closed in the walls, the wall was only half as high as it should be. That's what we mentioned at the end of Perek Gimel, right? Pasuk Lamed Chet, they were able to build up until now only half of what the wall should be. But so it was almost, they wanted to continue building. So therefore, when Sanballat and Tobiah became very angry, and they realized that mocking and criticizing isn't working, and as the work progressed, they planned to lead now a more violent attack against the work. On the one hand, it's interesting, on the one hand, we can say, this is very serious. The wall is being built to protect against the attacks of violence. And the whole idea that Nechemia had was, let's build a wall to protect the Jews from any attacks, right? For security reasons. But now it seems that the very opposite is happening. Building the wall is causing the attack, causing friction. That's what seems to be happening here, right? So I'm sure some people were probably thinking along the lines of, if we just stop building the wall, there wouldn't be any problems, no friction, no enemies. They would stop harassing us. No, I'm sure that's what was going on. That was what Sanballat and Tobiah were all trying to do. They were trying to get to our core soul of, you are the problem. Stop building and there won't be any problems. Right? Stop building the wall and we won't hurt you. We won't throw stones at you. We won't try to kill you. And in truth, that's a legitimate opinion even today. regarding our own enemies surrounding us, right? There are many, many opinions, not saying, right or wrong, not getting into politics, but there are people that say, if we just stop building in the Hityashvut area, all of our problems with the Arabs will just go away, right? The problem is that we're building housings in all these areas, in Shiloh and in Har Bracha and all these places. If we just stop building, they won't harass us. They'll stop attacking us. So that idea of this attrition, this whole idea of trying to crunch at our morale existed already then too. On the other hand, there's always on the other hand, this wasn't serious at all, because we notice at the end, up until now, they didn't attack. They were just talking the talk about it. So in a way, it was a bluff. And Sanballat and Tuvia were basically hoping that the threat of attack would be enough. But now they're realizing that the threat is no longer working, because Nechemia had a stronghold. Nechemia was a leader strong enough to convince his people. We saw that at the end of last week, not just through prayer, but as a leader, as one who has authority, to basically convince the people of Judea, building Yerushalayim, not to care about what is happening with the other nations. We have a job to do. Let's do it, and that's it. So that's what's going on. So there must be differences of opinions, commotion happening within our own camp because of what's going on. And at this point, Sanballat, Tuvia, and others decide to switch gears and say, you know what? We just succeeded a little bit in creating some type of rift amongst the people of Israel. Some think that they should stop. Nechemia is trying to bring them to continue. So what do? Pasuk Gimel. So the first thing Nechemia does is Vanitpalel el Eloheinu. Let's pray a little bit more, right? That's what I said. We always pray to Hashem. But at the same time, as a man of action, V'na'amid mishmar alihem yomam v'layla mipeneihem. So they might have given up. But prayers, tefillot, have a way of giving us strength. Was this a nisayon? Right? Maybe people are saying, this is a nisayon. We just got here. Nechemia just got here, not 3 days ago, a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago. By the time, we said it only took them 52 days. So 3 days after he arrived to Jerusalem, he immediately goes out and scouts and sees what's going on. A couple of days after that, he starts building. So we're talking just a couple of weeks. We have a new leader. So obviously this is from God. Is God trying us? All these nations that are, mocking us, and we'll see in a minute, are planning an imminent physical attack against us. Is it a nisayon? Meaning, will Israel give up or stand tall, believing this is just the right thing to do, and we will continue? Also, they could have simply said, let's just pray and let God take care of everything. But it's important for Nechemia to do the hishtadlut, to do due diligence, and create an armed guard to watch over them, to deflect any attempt of violence. So basically, it's the first attempt at building the IDF, Tzahal, right? While they're trying to build the walls, and the surrounding nations are planning an attack against us, violent attack. Up until now, it was just words, possibly stones, harassing us. Now it's getting more serious. So he says, you know what? We need to create somewhat of an army. And they say day and night. They started working day and night, right? Yomam v'layla. And this shows that Nechemia was determined. He wouldn't let the security of daylight or the sleepiness of the nighttime to keeping them from the work. And this sent a powerful message. And this is really the first, one of the reasons why Tzahal, the Haganah, was formed in the first place, in order to protect the Jewish people. Way back when the Arabs didn't let us just live and let live. They didn't let us, just live in Israel. Our surrounding enemies. The IDF has always specialized, by the way, with nighttime warfare. It says here that the mishmar in Pasuk Gimel, that the guard worked both day and night. And that is one of the specialized way Tzahal has always fought, being committed, literally, during the nighttime. And this is going to succeed because God is with us. We have our hishtadlut, and it sent a message to the enemy saying, you will not succeed. We trust in God, God trusts us, and we are succeeding properly to do what we should do. The idea of warfare during the nighttime, as a lot of you know historically, was one of the reasons why we were able to defeat the Arabs, both in the War of Independence, Milchemet HaShichrur, and also in Milchemet Sheshet HaYamim, is that we specialized fighting at nighttime, and that is how we surprised our enemies most times. So we see here that this was something already done by Nechemia. Let's continue to Pasuk Daled. Vayomer Yehuda, Kashal koach hasabal ve'afar harbe, ve'anachnu lo nuchal livnot bachoma. So Yehuda, by the way, it's interesting, all of a sudden it says Vayomer Yehuda. Who is Yehuda? Yehuda is not a, you would think that it's a name of a person, but the idea that Nechemia is trying to hint to is Yehuda is portrayed because it's known as, or was supposed to be, Yehuda is the strongest and bravest Shevet tribe, right? Yehuda. It was the tribe of great kings, all of the Malchei Yehuda, who are supposed to come and bring us salvation. But even for them, challenges arise from continuous mockery. At the end of the day, the surrounding Arabs, Tuvia, Geshem Aravi, all those, they know what they're doing. If you keep at it, and you continuously mock and criticize and throw stones and riots, it gets to you. However strong you are, it gets to you. And Nechemia and the Jews who are rebuilding Yerushalayim, they've been standing strong in the face of these attacks. But now that the rebuilding work is at halfway point, the walls are only halfway, the wall is almost continuous with no real breaches. That's when challenges arise, the halfway point. That's where they decided, the Sarani, that's where they're going to start switching gears. Dafka, when we get to the halfway point, it's a dangerous place to be. Much remains to be done, but fatigue sets in because they already did a lot, and they know they have to continue to doing it. So they've just finished enough to say, okay, we are somewhat secure, but there's more to be done. And it's one of the tactics that the IDF uses, for instance, when it tests soldiers being accepted to elite units. So I'll tell you a story. I have a lot of stories from the army, Baruch Hashem, that when soldiers try out for elite units, like Saret Matkal and the Shayetet and Sheshesh Teisha and all the Sayarot, Sayeret Golani, Givati, all these like really special forces, special units. So what the army does is that they make it very hard for you, and about halfway they make you run with heavy packets all over you, and really people are like dying just to sit down and rest. And then all of a sudden they bring out like a little truck that has icy Coca-Colas, right? Icy Coca-Colas and ice cream, and really, really cold water. And these soldiers are like, they finally, after going, running and crawling, 10 kilometers and more with heavy packet, dying just to rest, they get to this point when there's this like a nice table full of all these like ice creams and cold Cokes. And they say to these soldiers, okay, you did a great job. We're so proud of you. And here's some ice cream and Cokes. And right before they reach out to grab a Coke, they say, wait a minute, if you grab that Coke, you will finally have, you'll have hot and cold water, you'll finally feel much better, but there's another 10 kilometers to go. If you drink that Coke, you failed. You want to be accepted and admitted to this elite unit, you're not allowed to drink, you got to go the extra 10 kilometers. And then you have soldiers like, oh my God, I did halfway, I'm dying, all I want, it's psychologically, it's very, very hard. And I can tell you, over 50% of the soldiers, they break at that point because the army makes it as if you finally succeeded, have your Coke, and they say, you're only halfway there. So if you have a whole 50% more to go and you're dying, like, oh my God, I can't make it, they end up drinking the Coke. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening here as well. So they've done halfway through, and this is when the Arabs around switch gears. So the work of rebuilding the walls was not only about construction, it was also about cleaning and hauling away all the rubbish, the ruins of the walls lying in waste for 100 years. Think about it. No, it's about collecting all kind of rubbish. Now, we all know clearing away the rubbish has to be done. In order to build, you have to clear away what's there. Often, the work of building is a lot easier than cleaning away the rubbish. It's tiring, and no one really wants to take out the garbage, right? I mean, it's, I can tell you from my kids' point of view, they all prefer helping Ima cook than they do washing the dishes afterwards, right? Everyone wants to help cook and bake. It's much more fun, even though it's hard work. You do it because it's fun. But when you say, no, your job is to wash dishes and sweep and clean, oh, no, that I don't want to do, right? And that's what they have to do, and that's where they are now. They just built half of the wall, right? Now to continue, they have to clear away all the rubbish. And that's when those sneaky Arabs, those sneaky nations, Sanballat, Tuvia, and Geshem, they sneak in, ready to strike at the Jewish people. So morale, though, is high on building, they're really, really tired. Pasuk Hey, Vayomru tsarenu lo yed'u velo yir'u ad asher navo el tocham veharagnu veishbatnu et hamelacha. So now the enemies plan a surprise attack. So Pasuk Hey may be or may mark the lowest point in the spirits of those who are doing the work. Things were already in a bad state, and the discouraged workers felt like giving up. And now the enemy is planning a raid on the workers to crush those who are rebuilding the walls. So it's doubtful that these enemies knew exactly how discouraged the people, the workers were. Often attacks are successful when they come as a surprise. So after everything is going, that's when they start to attack physically, stabbing, kidnapping, group lynches. That's what we're talking about. Things have not changed for 3,000 years, a little, 2,500 years ago. We have that also, unfortunately, Shar Shem, right? You wouldn't, Jews, are putting their life in danger by going to these places. Now, luckily, in Pasuk Vav, we see how smart Nechemia is. Pasuk Vav. Vayehi kasher ba'u haYehudim hayoshvim etzlam vayomru lanu 10 פעמים מכל המקומות אשר תשובו עלינו. We had spies, or should I say we had mashtapim. What's a mashtap? Mishatfei pe'ula, informants within the enemy camp. So we hear about that today also, that we have mashtapim. We had mashtapim then too. Nechemia basically inserted Jews to sit in their camps so we can find out and extract information. So it's easy to picture this scene and see the informants. They go ahead, after hearing what's going on, they go in repeating over and over again, an attack is coming. It's for real. Tuvia and Geshem and Sanballat, they are planning an attack. They have their slingshots and their swords and their, it's real. Like, Nechemia, please, we got to do something. So from whatever place you turn, they're going to be upon us. Nechemia, you got to do something. Nechemia, he doesn't panic. Nechemia does not panic. He's okay. Pasuk Zayin and Pasuk Chet explain to us what is going on. Pasuk Zayin. Va'amid mitachtiyot lamakom me'acharei לחומה בת צחיחים, ואעמיד את העם למשפחות עם חורבותיהם רומחיהם וקשתותיהם. וארא, ואקום, ואומר אל החורים ואל הסגנים, ואל יתר העם, אל תראו מפניהם את אדוני הגדול והנורא, זכורו, והילחמו על אחיכם, בניכם ובנותיכם, נשיכם ובתיכם. So, what does Nechemia do after he hears his mashtapim, his spies come in and say, Nechemia, they're planning a physical attack is imminent, war, the next battle. They're switching gears. It's not about stabbing, it's about killing, it's about taking us hostages. So what does Nechemia tell us that he does? He armed the people with swords, spears, all the people, not just soldiers, all the people with swords, spears, and bows, and stationed them by clans behind the wall, wherever it was still unfinished, in those breaches where they didn't yet finish everything. And then he goes, I saw that the people were worried. So I said to them and to their leaders and to the officials, don't be afraid of our enemies. Remember how great and terrifying God is. Fight for your relatives. Fight for your children. Fight for your wives. Fight for your homes. Nechemia organizes a defense. Similar to the late 1900s, when the second Aliyah organized a group of Jews to defend plots of land instead of using Arab guards, right? Giora and others. The truth is, I don't understand something that always still bothers me. I don't understand why today there are Arab guards at our malls. If you go to, for instance, Kenyon Hadar, you'll see Arab guards, right? We're in a nation that tries to be caring and equal amongst all people, and therefore, if an Arab wants to be a guard, why not? Let him be a guard, and that's what happens, right? But we can see Nechemia organizes a Jewish brigade. That's what he's basically organized. So the first Jewish brigade, which is not an official army of a king, like we saw with Malchei Yehuda or Malchei Israel. There's no king here. The first Jewish brigade, an armed, was people, regular human beings, regular people, Amcha, were basically becoming guards and military soldiers. So these verses basically tell us what Nechemia did. But we can also think of what Nechemia could have done in this situation. Not only what he did, but what he could have done. He could have done nothing. He said, why bother? Let's just trust in God. Let's pray some more, right? He could have panicked and started thinking it was his job alone to defend against an attack. Use his authority. Call in the Persian army. Let's face it. He has the Persian army backing him. He has Artaxerxes, who gave him the authority. But he doesn't use his authority to bring in the Persian army. What he does is he creates a Jewish brigade, a Jewish army. So what he did was very, very wise. Let's give the people a sense of pride. They can defend themselves. That's why it's called Tzva Hagana Yisrael. We can defend ourselves. So I guess the first Tzva Hagana Yisrael was created by Nechemia. Nechemia commanded them to bring out their armor. It was time to get serious, to put on the full armor, and to get ready to fight with every resource that they had. He says to them, do not be afraid. That's very powerful. Don't be afraid. I understand that you are afraid. It's okay, but no. Put your minds in the right perspective. Challenges are great. There's no reason for fear. Fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, your houses. Nechemia reminds them what they were fighting for. And as we saw, what was done is that we saw this in last Perek, where I basically said what he does is that he puts each clan, each family, guarding the portion of wall that is closest to their own homes. So they feel that they're also protecting their own home, not just the wall, but also their own home. And that's very, very important. And that's a great way to bring up the morale, create an army for the future, and to allow them to succeed in continuing to build the wall that is supposed to give them security. Okay, Pasuk Tet. Let's go on to Pasuk Tet. Vayehi kasher sham'u oivenu ki noda lanu vayafer ha'elohim et atzatam vanashov kulanu el hachuma ish el melachto. When our enemies, Sanballat and all the others, heard that we found out what they were plotting because of our spies, our mashtapim, our informants, and then they realized that God has defeated their plans, God of Israel, then all of us, we, says Nechemia, we went back to rebuilding the wall. He succeeded and the enemy retreated. That's his success. But what his main success was, is that he did not show the enemies how strong we are, as we say, kochi ve'otzem yadi. But rather, what they're saying is, it must be the God of Israel. It must be ha'elohim, their gods, the God of Israel. So once they saw that the armed guard, a Jewish guard, right, not a Persian guard, that we are fending for ourselves, the enemies retreated. This was a victory. Defending against the attack was not the victory, but rather, as mentioned in the Pasuk, getting back to work is our victory. Being able to build and rebuild, that is our victory, because we've succeeded now in having the enemies retreat and going back to work. Pasuk Yud. Vayehi min hayom hahu חצי נערי עושים במלאכה, וחציים מחזיקים, והרמחים המגינים והקשתות והשריונים, והשרים אחרי כל בית יהודה. I want you to have in your minds for a minute what it must have looked like, and from pictures that you've all seen from those who started Medinat Israel. The Pasuk basically is saying from then, from that point, when the enemy succeeded, when the enemy retreated, we succeeded in pushing them out. From then, half of the men worked, half stood guard, wearing coats of armor and armed with spears and with shields and bows and arrows. And then our leaders gave their full support to the people. Must have been how we were able to build the kibbutzim. We all know all of the famous stories about, we had people, a sword in one hand and building with the other hand, right? That was already then, during the time of Nechemia. Pasuk Yud Aleph. Habonim b'choma ve'anos'im b'sevel omsim be'achat yado ose b'melacha ve'achat מחזקת השלח, והבונים איש חרבו אסורים על מותניו ובונים, והתוקע בשופר אצלי. So he says, who were building the walls? Even those who carried building materials worked with one hand and kept a weapon in the other hand. Everyone who was building kept a sword strapped to their waist, everyone, which also means men, possibly women, and children too. Mamash, everyone was building, kept a sword strapped to their waist, and then men sounded an alarm on the shofar in order to, if they saw somebody coming, if they saw the enemy trying to get closer, they started blowing the shofar to alert all those around. So one hand, they worked at construction, and with the other, they held a weapon. It's as if we're reading about, like I said, the second and third Aliyah in the beginning of the 20th century, when we built up the country, the kibbutzim, while under constant attack by the Arabs. That is really what happened then and what happened also during the time of Nechemia. The workers had a sword at their side and construction tools in their hands to get the work done. Mamash. Now, plans are also made to keep ready a defense, because just because they're succeeding doesn't mean that they can't have they shouldn't continue to plan ahead. So let's continue. Pasuk Yud Gimel. ואומר אל החורים ואל הסגנים ואל יתר העם, המלאכה הרבה ורחבה, ואנחנו נפרדים על החומה רחוקים איש מאחיו. במקום אשר תשמעו את קול השופר, שמה תקבצו אלינו, אלוהינו יילחם לנו. So Nechemia says, I told the people and the officials that I appointed to be the leaders, the work is spread out. Everyone is all over the place. Now that also the walls are more or less continuous, now they're spread out. And there's a big distance. If you recall, I showed you the map of the wall that we were doing. It goes down south. And people are scarce, they're spread out. So if you hear the shofar, gather around me. Don't worry. We are okay. God will fight for us. So every day, Pasuk Tetvav. ואנחנו עושים במלאכה וחציים מחזיקים ברמחים מעלות השחר עד צאת הכוכבים. So every day, from dawn until the stars came out at night, half of us were working on the walls, while the other half stood guard with spears. During this time, Pasuk Tetzayin, during this time, גם בעת ההיא אמרתי לעם, איש ונערו ילינו בתוך ירושלים, והיו לנו הלילה משמר והיום מלאכה. During this time, I told the men in charge that they and all their helpers had to stay in Yerushalayim at nighttime so we can guard the city at night as well as work during the daytime. It's planned. No one goes home. No one goes home at night. You stay so that you're there and ready to wake up early in the morning. Nechemia knew that they had to keep communication open if the work was going to be done. The shofar was a new, old way of communication to meet all the challenges that they face. They would not be caught off guard if an attack was attempted. So they dedicated themselves to work, all the more working hard, from sunrise all the way to the darkness. It's tzedek kohavim, spending the night out on the job to protect against attack. And they kept their clothes on. That's what's amazing here. They didn't change into pajamas, right? They kept their clothes on all the time, so they wouldn't be caught unprepared. They were always ready to respond, constantly ready to respond. The last pasuk, ve'en ani ve'achai un'arai ve'anshe ha'mishmar asher acharai en anachnu poshtim begadeinu ish shilcho hamayim. I didn't take off my clothes, nor did anyone else, none of my companions, in order to ensure that everyone is prepared and ready at all times. We kept our weapons at hand, our construction tools in the other hand, and we worked tirelessly to finish building the walls. And as we saw, they completed the wall in 52 days. Now, the next chapter, chapter Hey, Perek Hey, in a way interferes with our story. For us to really continue the story of building the wall, we're going to need to skip to Perek Vav, to chapter 6. Why? Because when Tuvia, Sanballat, and Geshem Aravi realized that they were unsuccessful, that we built a great guard, that we, Tzva Haganah Yisrael, that we're tirelessly continuing to build, they can't come close because we have Nechemia established this beautiful surrounding with the shofar, so we know at all times where anybody is. No more lynching, no more kidnapping, no more stoning. At any moment, we are ready to jump. Every worker has a spear, has a sword. So the next chapter in the series of building the Chumah is basically Perek Vav, not Perek A. Perek A discusses something else. Perek Vav is an attempt to actually assassinate Nechemia. You see, what they understood is that the driving force is Nechemia. He is the leader. and they attempt to assassinate Nechemia because they couldn't succeed in getting to the workers. They couldn't succeed in stopping the work. What they're going to try to do in Perek Vav is to assassinate Nechemia, cut off the head. Maybe they'll succeed in stopping the work as well. So Be'ezrat Hashem, next week, we will skip to Perek Vav, and once we're done with Perek Vav, we will go back to Perek Hey. Perek Hey is a different sugya completely. It talks about the successes from a kalkali and from the economy and the social reforms that Nechemia did. So we're going to skip that Perek, go to Perek Vav, and then when we're done, we'll come back to Perek Hey, Be'ezrat Hashem. So Shavua Tov, everyone, and looking forward to continuing and hopefully ensuring that Nechemia is secure and safe, and that they don't succeed in their attempts to assassinate Nechemia.